To do an interview with the MP Andrew Bridgen. He is the MP for the North West Leicestershire constituency and has been since 2010. I've spoken to you quite a few times, Andrew, and I'm really glad that we've had a chance to do this interview today. We're going to be talking about media trust during a crisis. We're going to be talking about making a fool of yourself because it's the right thing to do. We're going to talk about how the fact that you don't think you're ever going to become a minister because you're a troublemaker, but a troublemaker for the right reasons. And we're going to be talking about the BBC and how you've had some really big stories of corruption, injustice and abuse. And you have said to me, who will run it? And that's when I get involved, okay? That's when I get angry because I know that you have evidence and I know you've done due diligence and I know you've spoken to lots of different individuals and you've compiled the evidence and you've put it forward. There isn't the time. There isn't the interest from these editors of these news organisations to take these stories on, and that disgusts me, quite frankly. So thank you very much for talking to me. Let's start just very quickly about you getting into politics. You were a career politician. You went in, you were a very successful businessman. You're not making any, you were making a lot more money before you became a politician. I found that very interesting. You're a very successful business person. You went into this to make a difference. I got the impression from the interview I heard. Is that right? That's very powerful because you certainly didn't do it for money. Did you do it for power or did you do it to make a difference?
We did it to make a difference and we have made a difference. I don't know, when I became an MP, I think it's a great privilege to be, especially when you're elected to represent the area that you call your home, that's a huge privilege anyway. And I never wanted to, whenever my career ends in politics, however that may be, and apparently they all end in failure, so it's only a matter of time. I don't want to look back in Hansard and say, oh, I wish I hadn't said that. I wish I said something I knew wasn't right and that's there forever. And I look back on everything I've said in Hansard and I don't mind. It's all there to be seen and it's what I believed at the time. And I think most of it's proven to be right. I've had a fair few run-ins with John Bercow, the old speaker, and a notable one on his last day, which sort of spoiled his leaving party a bit, but he had it coming, to be honest. I mean,
tell us about that. About that. It was to do with Keith Vaz, wasn't it? You've got a long history.
Yes.
You and Keith don't get on at all, do you?
That to the fag end of your tenure in that chair, you are defending the indefensible and your very close relationship with the honourable member in question.
Say to the honourable gentleman, he can try to smear me. He will get the square root of nowhere.
Where I raised my concerns with you that the actions of and activities of the then chairman of the Home Affairs Select Committee, if they came to light, would risk seriously damaging...
One will resume his seat. This matter was raised on a previous occasion. Frankly, I have to say to colleagues, I can't help him. And the committee has determined the matter. It would be, I think, seemly if the honourable gentleman speedily brought his speech to a conclusion. Mr. Andrew Bridgen.
Thank you once again for more help and advice, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable gentleman will resume his seat. It's not help and advice. I'm telling the honourable gentleman what the position is. Don't mix it with the chair. If you've got a couple more sentences to utter, you will do so. If you want to dilate at length, you will not. I'm not trying to defend the conduct of the right honourable member. What I'm doing on behalf and in support of the House is defending, colleagues, members of the public, the integrity of an independent process.
You just couldn't predict him, and he had a terrible temper, which he couldn't control. And he was biased. He's a man who'd been on a political journey, so he joined as a far-right conservative, a member of the Monday Club, and I can tell you, I wouldn't have joined. I mean, I'm seen as a right-wing conservative, but I wouldn't have joined the Monday Club in a month of Sundays. So he'd been on a journey, and he was certainly biased. He had his favourites, and he, in my opinion, he tried to bully people. He tried to bully me, but I mean, I think I'm big enough and ugly enough that I wasn't going to fall for any of that. But I've seen him destroy newly elected MPs. The Chamber's a tremendously intimidating place. Once they know how to destroy you, they will they will do it every time. So any chink in your armour. And when you see the Speaker berating newly elected MPs for getting the procedure wrong, and I can promise you, no one tells you what the procedure is. You have to learn it all yourself. There's not, you know, your introduction to the chamber was 45 minutes in the chamber, being lectured by 3 experienced MPs, one from each of the major parties. And then they said, well, just come into the chamber and absorb it. I mean, there's no help at all. And then if people get the procedure wrong, to show how clever he was, John Bercow would bully them and shout at them and berate them and belittle them.
Well, he's old news. I don't want to talk about him anymore. He's old news. But it's the corruption, abuse and injustice and the stories that you have tried to take to these news media organisations that they've not covered. That's specifically I want to ask you about, Andrew.
Yeah, well, I tried to defend Mike Veal in the Conifer investigation, and in fact, I did tell Mike Veal 18 months before he completed that report, you know, that if you're going to do this properly, and if you come out with results that the establishment won't like, you do realise they're going to remove you. And I don't think Mike.
You need to explain who Mike Veal is.
Mike Veal was the former chief constable of Wiltshire Police who did the investigation into allegations of child abuse against Edward Heath, who was deceased at the time. And you know, the way that Mike was attacked and his report before it even came out by the mainstream media, I mean, you just got to ask yourself who's pulling the strings here, because no one had ever been attacked like that, and he hadn't even produced his report. And sure enough, my prediction to him 18 months before the report was finalised all came true, in that his conclusion was that, and it's all he could take it to, he was very clear, that because Edward Heath was no longer alive and couldn't answer any of the questions that would be posed to him, the only conclusion they could come to was that had he been alive, he would have been taken to the next stage, that the police would have asked him to come in to give evidence and explain himself under caution. And if he wouldn't have come voluntarily, he would have been arrested and brought in for questioning with regard to child abuse allegations. And that could never go any further than that, but even that was enough
But we've all forgotten about that now. We've all forgotten about that. The mainstream media kept pushing. So I've got very involved in this story, Andrew. I know a lot about it, the Westminster paedophile ring. And I had a moment when the Independent Inquiry into Child Sexual Abuse published their report, where they said that Margaret Thatcher knew it was going on, that they knew about Cyril Smith in the 1980s, and I'd met a victim of Cyril Smith in the 1990s. And I saw all the reports in the mainstream media basically saying there was nothing to see here, there was no cover up. And I had a moment, Andrew, because I've been working on this for over a year. I had a moment and thought, I've had enough now. No good journalism is going on here. Mark Watts, I'm aware, was at the Independent Inquiry into Child Sexual Abuse every day, the Westminster hearings back in March 2019. I went along to some of them, but there were no other media organisations there. And on oath, you know, testimonies on oath, which are on my YouTube channel, senior police officers testifying on oath, they were told to cover up the paedophile VIPs. And we're talking about the meat rack. And I didn't see that anywhere. I didn't see that on the BBC, where I used to work. I didn't see that on the ITV. I didn't see it on Sky. And I felt so angry. And I speak to people like you. You do have power. You are trying to make a difference. When it comes to children, you know, there is no excuse. There is no excuse. If we don't look after our children, if politicians have been sexually abusing children, and our British media have not covering
not just anybody's abusing children, it's got to be stamped out. I mean, I've taken evidence and whistleblowers to very respected newspapers and been told point blank, yeah, we completely believe what you're saying. We've actually, you know, you're not the first one who's bought this sort of story for, but you've bought this, and it's never going to get through the editor. It's never going to get into print. And some of them are actually rather worse than that. That you go to them with allegations and some evidence, and they actually try and twist the whole story. They'll try and pick one hole in one piece of the evidence, and then discredit the whole lot. And it makes you very, very suspicious. And I'm not a great conspiracy theorist, but these things aren't happening by accident, are they? I mean, it's just...
You're not a conspiracy theorist. There's too much evidence. I'm sorry, it stacks up. It stacks up. You know, I've been speaking to victims and survivors of abuse and whistleblowers from within media organisations. Look at Jimmy Savile. Look at how Miriam Jones, who was at the BBC, top reporter at the BBC, said those on the right side of the Savile to get him exposed were seen as traitors. This is the problem with these media organisations. But there is hope. You know, people like myself have got YouTube channels and Twitter feeds that are growing. I'm able to speak to you, people like yourself.
Well, let's start with good policies that will work. Then the politics will look after itself, won't it? That no accountability is how you end up with editorial views that may not be representing the people that who are paying for the service in any way whatsoever. And also, that arrogance of management leads to things like Jimmy Savile carrying on. They're both on that spectrum of no accountability. So that's what I don't like any power and authority without accountability. It was actually all about, I wanted the people in North West Leicestershire to be able to vote for an MP who actually did make their laws, or was in Parliament that made their laws. And if they didn't like the laws that me or my party were making, they vote for someone else and have some different laws. That's the basis of sovereignty. And that accountability is what keeps everyone on the straight and narrow.